Well, the very latest we have on this particular story is that the protesters who were arrested have been released. We're still trying to establish contact with their spokesperson, and we will bring you the details of what they encountered whilst they were in police custody. But moving on, a political science lecturer at the University of Ghana is threatening to sue the BBC over its Sex for Grades documentary he says is an attempt by some faceless persons to entrap and needlessly damage his reputation. The documentary, which was released on the BBC Africa YouTube page just about an hour ago, features a number of university lecturers in Ghana and Nigeria, including Professor Jampo, who the documentary says the documentary producers say sexually harassed their students. Professor Jampo, in the documentary, seen in a secret recording, engaged in conversations with an undercover reporter who posed as a student. Before we bring you Professor Jampo's reaction to the contents of the documentary, here is an excerpt.
Of all the lecturers in the University of Ghana, one stands out for his power and influence. Political scientist and outspoken commentator, Professor Ransford Jampo. He enjoys a great reputation as a teacher among his students. But he's also been at the center of allegations of sexual harassment. We sent an undercover journalist known as Abigail to meet him. Posing as a University of Ghana student from a poor background, she attended one of Jampo's classes. He agreed to become her mentor. She wrote him essays to review, visited his office 3 times, and he gave her good feedback on her academic work.
So the German situation, academic freedom. So Google what we mean by academic freedom in the first place.
Not everything felt normal. Professor Jampo wanted her to wear high heels in his office. And then, one Sunday afternoon, Abigail received a strange phone call from him.
Hello.
How are you?
Fine, thank you.
He began to tease her and accuse her of always being formal around him.
Formal. You want to talk about work, nothing else. It's sabudenche.
Abigail tried her best not to upset Jampo, who became increasingly personal and said he wanted to come over to her house.
Who is not married and doesn't want a decent lady who is also caring? Who of them want?
She reminded him she was a student and told him she wasn't interested in a relationship.
Well, right now, that's why I'm not really interested in
But Professor Jampo ignored this.
Well, prepare your mind because I'll be coming very soon.
Eventually, Abigail managed to persuade him to meet in a public place, a mall, instead of her home, later that evening. We knew we would have to be cautious. Long before Abigail met Professor Jampo, we interviewed a number of his former students who alleged they had been sexually harassed by him. One of them, who we shall call Na, agreed to anonymously speak to us on camera.
So yeah, you need to build that and call them into squares. You can call the blood.
Na told us she was sexually harassed twice by Jampo. She alleges the second incident took place when she went to confront him about the first harassment.
I felt it was my responsibility to let him know that what he did wasn't okay with me. So I went to him. He apologized and he tried to console me, and in consoling me, he attempted touching me. I was dumbfounded. I just couldn't believe that a moment ago he was apologizing and the next moment he was on top of me trying to touch my breast, hold me, that kind of things.
She says her encounters with the professor and a past history of other abuse have left her traumatized.
It's difficult, and till today I can't sleep with my lights off. I get panic sometimes at night. It's not something you get over, especially when the person is protected and you never get justice for what happens to you.
Before Abigail reached the shopping mall, we knew Jampo had already crossed red lines over the phone. But we wanted to be sure of his intentions towards his mentee, our reporter. Abigail showed me footage of their encounter. As soon as Jampo arrived, he insisted on buying her shoes as she had reluctantly agreed to on the phone.
I want to buy something. I told you right into so let me buy one. One for school, one for
Okay. I don't want inconvenience.
increased violence in the phone.
Pardon?
That increased violence in the phone.
Have I ever been?
Increased violence in the phone.
Did he just...
We were just talking about shoes and killed violently. I was like, what is going on?
After that comment, Abigail felt it was better to just go and buy the shoes. Once in the shoe shop, Jampo bought her heels.
Stop pushing yourself away. Don't be my wife.
Pardon?
Don't be my wife. Stop pushing yourself away.
I had literally seen him 4 times, and all of a sudden, marriage.
Back in the restaurant, Abigail asked about internships, but Jampo had something else in mind.
Just want to reach it. Go a bit fat for me. Nothing, make a money, make a fit to my own club.
Hey, oh, mommy, out.
Watching the footage, this didn't feel like a real marriage proposal. The professor laid out how Abigail would benefit from his support.
Look at phone and tell me that someone says he wants to marry me for school. Push you to do national service, you push you to do masters.
But he seemed more interested in other things.
I grab you and kiss you and here. By the time I release you, see all the sadness more. What else did you do at SSC? You could have fought this school.
It's not true.
Abigail was then pushed to have a relationship with him. After that, she rang the team and began to leave. But Jampo made one last move.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Pardon?
Abigail did not hug him. After this meeting, she spoke to Professor Jampo on the phone, and he told her it was okay that she didn't want to be his girlfriend, but she should continue to be mentored by him.
Well, JoyNews has spoken with Professor Jampo, who has refuted claims he ever exchanged sex for grades. He maintains the undercover reporter who approached him in the documentary was not a student of the University of Ghana.
If you look at the BBC's own title, they said we're investigating alleged so-called sex for grade. And I'm sure you've seen the video, and you should answer whether it has to do with sex for grade or whatever. It has got nothing to do with a relationship between a lecturer and a student. It has everything to do with a lecturer and a friend. Somebody who was sent to come and trap. In the process of her entrapment, she became a friend, and we had our conversation as friends. And some of the conversations were very informal, but we are all mindful of the fact that it had got nothing to do with my professional relationship with a student and all that. And so if you have looked at the video, it has got nothing to do with somebody having sex and changing. How do you talk about sex for grade between a lecturer and somebody who is not his student? And so it is misleading, but it seems to me that I explained the circumstances to them, and it seems to me that there are people behind the scenes trying to pull the strings just to be able to embarrass me and all that. Because if you speak to the BBC, they tend to understand your point of view. I've written extensively. I'm going to give you copies of these letters. This is my first letter I wrote to them. It's an 11-pager. The second letter, it's here, and then the third letter explaining. And I made a lot of points, raised a lot of issues with what we were seeking to do. But some way, somehow, they decided not to factor anything that I have said in this letter into their own reportage. And the people that they were supposed to speak to, we had conversations here with my assistants, in the office. They don't want to speak to them. And it's like they are bent on pushing a certain angle just to be able to embarrass me. I can understand, because this is not the first time incident like this has happened.
What do you intend to do afterwards?
Well, I've seen my portion of the documentary already, and my lawyers had prepared my suit even long before they aired. We saw the documentary, and so tomorrow morning we'll sue them. Go to court, we'll sue them, and let them know that the BBC of yesteryears is not the BBC today. The BBC of yesteryears that was independent and would look into matters from all angles is now the BBC of a few people who are paid by some politicians who do not like people who are independent-minded. They get paid and they get pushed to do their bidding. And I'm happy. You see in my letter, I've told them that they are doing the bidding of some people, and I expect them to be independent-minded. When you saw the video, were you not disappointed? You were expecting a lecturer sleeping with a student and going to change the grade. Who does that? It doesn't make sense. BBC must set up. Otherwise, they are as useless as any other media outlet that is not worth its salt.
Right, so that was Professor Ransford Jampo. We spoke with him earlier in the day. Now, in the last 4 hours, he has posted, put up a post on his Facebook page, and it is in response to the BBC documentary. And so we're going to go to the page right away to share with you what he has. He says, "Good afternoon, folks. I have been counseled to be silent on the matter of entrapment masterminded by a certain unscrupulous people with the aid of BBC African Eye against me. Unfortunately, my students this afternoon also insisted that I say something to clear the air. I'm grateful to them for the support they showed me this afternoon. I'm grateful to all my friends for the numerous phone calls and messages to show solidarity. For my haters who are expecting to see a worst video and actually texted to rejoice over what they think is going to be my downfall, I forgive them. I have a lot to say about this matter, but I'm suing the BBC for defamation tomorrow, so I will keep some of the facts to myself for now. Let me state, however, that I have not involved myself in the BBC's so-called sex for grades and will never do so. Their own video documentary evidence could not establish this. I am aware of my university's sexual harassment policy, and I've always adhered to its dogmas. The lady involved in my informal conversation was not my student, and she wasn't also a student from the University of Ghana where I teach. I therefore cannot decipher how I could manipulate the grade of a non-student. The BBC ignored all her contributions to our conversation. They ignored all her messages she sent to me. They ignored my objections and letters written to refute the allegations. They also edited the video to suit their purpose. While I prepared to sue the BBC for carrying out the most bogus and unprofessional piece of documentary in the world so far, I wish to remind them that Ghana, and for that matter Africa, has long thrown out the yoke of colonialism. We are independent. We are an independent continent with our institutions, our own institutions that can handle internal matters. There cannot be much talk about strengthening institutions when they are blatantly prevented from doing their work by needless intruders like the BBC. The University of Ghana, where I teach, has credible outfit and mechanisms for dealing with matters of harassment. Why did the BBC refuse to encourage the one harassed to report the matter? Sexual harassment is also a criminal matter. Why has the BBC refused to report the matter? I am aware of those behind this, just for the purposes of gagging me. But I wish to assure them that I remain Yajampo. I won't be silenced. Their worst may be to kill me. But inasmuch as I love my family, I won't be scared to die in the course of keeping regimes on their toes, without malice, just for the purposes of shaping our governance landscape. I have not engaged in any so-called sex for grades, and I'll stay true to my calling in doing my best for God, students, and country. And he adds his address. We're out there on the University of Ghana campus tonight to bring you reactions following the airing of the full documentary, and we will share those reactions with you as well as what the university authorities have to say about it. Before that though, a lecturer at the Department of Archaeology, Dr. Ishaq Issa, has strongly criticized the documentary, insisting the BBC failed to establish any sex for grades as alleged in the documentary.
I just finished watching the video, and it sounds interesting, because for that of the University of Ghana, there is nowhere from the interview or from the video where the lecturer asks for any sex for grade. In fact, one of the most unfortunate thing and interesting in another side is that even the undercover journalist is not a student. So where would somebody establish sex for grade when you are not even a student? You don't have ID number. You understand? She claimed that they interviewed some students who, you understand, confirmed the man doing, but not a single student was shown in the video. That of University of Lagos, some students were interviewed covering their faces, but that of University of Ghana, there is nothing like that. So where would you establish sex for grade?
But we haven't had the opportunity to watch the full thing yet.
I did. I just finished watching the video.
What you watched is an excerpt.
No,
it's an excerpt. It's actually, a 13-minute excerpt.
I watched the 20-minute excerpt of the video, you understand, and that is what we have on the ground. You understand? We are making comment prior to the coming out of the full video. But what we have now on the ground is the 20-minute, and there is nowhere in the video where sex for grade was mentioned. You understand? There is no evidence in anywhere. And for records' sake, there is nowhere in the university where you see a lecturer, a reasonable lecturer, asking students to come and sleep with them for marks. You understand? Most of the times, the students are the one tempting the lecturers. They go there to ask for A, and when you ask for A, and the lecturer try to do some funny things, then you become and say he harassed you or something like that.
So as you heard the lecturer say, sometimes it is the students who harass the lecturers for grades now, or for sex. We will be going to the University of Ghana campus to get to hear from the students themselves about all that has been said by the lecturer and by what we have seen in the documentary. SRC President Isaac Ajimang also says his outfit will do whatever it takes to ensure that any lecturer found culpable is dealt with by the full force of the law.
Right from the onset, these have been allegations, these have been speculative remarks that have been on the tongues of various people over the years. But at this juncture, I think realities are now glaring. I mean, in the alleged video that in a way doesn't, to a large extent, proves either someone is guilty or not until the law actually comes out to make such pronouncement. But when I saw an excerpt of the video, I was really shocked. I didn't know it would get to a time when I would actually have realities glaring in my eyes. I believe justice would be served. I believe the fragments of the laws are explicit, and in the university's codes of conduct and ethics among lecturers also goes on to suggest what a lecturer is to do or what senior management members are to do and not to do. So of course, I see that in the coming days, as an SRC, we would actually advance this course because our students are much involved in this. If it has happened to someone who is, of course, what about our students who have also been victims of these circumstances? So, of course, in the long run, we as an SRC are taking a stern position on this, that should anyone be found culpable, the person must be made to face the full rigors of the law.
All right, so right now, as we speak, on the trends, Twitter trends, we have sex for grades trending at number 1 with 230,000 tweets, then followed by Jampo, which clearly will be Professor Ransford Jampo, who has been the main man whose issue has been discussed thoroughly. And then also on the trends, we have opening up legal education, which has to do with protests by the students, the law students. Let's go over now to the University of Ghana campus. Maxwell Agbagba is standing by. Now, Maxwell, the students have had the opportunity to watch the entire documentary. What are the reactions? Right, Maxwell, if you can hear me, the students have had the opportunity to watch the entire documentary, I believe. What are their reactions? All right, so we appear apparently having to have some challenges with the connection to Maxwell there, but as you can see, he's there at the University of Ghana and in one of the lecture halls, I believe, but he will be engaging some of the students pretty shortly. What we're seeking to find out, when we earlier spoke with the students, and we have spoken with them earlier in the day, they have not seen the full documentary. What they have seen were excerpts, was just the teaser. Now, the full documentary is out, and we have shown you 7 minutes of that documentary right here on JoyNews Prime, which focuses mainly on Professor Ransford Jampo. Now, let's go back to the University of Ghana campus and to Maxwell Agbagba to give us a brief of what the students have been telling him. Hello, Maxwell.
Yeah, hello, Israel.
All right, so you go ahead and tell us, what are the reactions you've been getting?
Well, opinions are quite divided on this subject, especially after some of the students watched this documentary. We are currently here at the physics department here at the University of Ghana, and all the people you see here are members of the University of Ghana Debate Society. Today happens to be one of their meeting days, and what you can see projected on the screen there is the documentary Sex for Grades. And what you're doing now is to watch the documentary, and then when they are done, we are told that it will be followed with analysis. Well, for some students who've had opportunity to watch the documentary already, those we met earlier here on the campus, they've started already asking questions about what is going to happen next. Some of the people that I spoke to were of the view that the evidence that they saw in the documentary was not incriminating enough, and they feel that the 2 lecturers who've been indicted in this particular documentary would walk scot-free. A lot of them also have been sent back by this documentary. They've gone back to revise the University of Ghana anti-sexual harassment policy, which was drafted in the year 2010. And we are told that that was also reviewed in 2017, just basically looking at the sanctions that possibly could be meted out to the 2 lecturers indicted in this documentary. They've been talking about perhaps suspensions, pay without pay. They've also been talking about dismissal when the investigation is able to prove a case against these 2 lecturers in the documentary. But I have with me here the president of the University Teachers Association of Ghana. We invited him here to basically discuss this matter. He's not part of the screening here, but we invited him here so we can interact with him and find out from him what he makes of this documentary. Dr. Samuel Nkumba, you are the president of the University Teachers Association of Ghana, and I'm sure UTAG has a rep on the anti-sexual harassment, committee here. I don't know, are you the rep or you have?
I'm not the rep. We do have a rep. The chair of the committee is a member.
Okay. Before we delve into the details, tell me, what are your impressions of this documentary? You first saw the trailer, and now you've seen some parts of it here on this projected screen. What are your first impressions, your preliminary remarks?
Well, I must indicate that UTAG as a body and a professional body, that we are conscious of our code of ethics. We are conscious about the policies governing the university, and usually, and when we of lecturers, we have an orientation at which these documents are made available to them. And of course, we can agree that individuals may have the, but if the law catches up with them, then they face the penalty for it. And so from 2010 until now, I can say for a fact, committee, and some have lost their jobs, others have had to have other forms of sanctions, provided it was established against them by evidence that they had there were infractions against the laws governing how they ought to operate within the university system.
Are you able to put the number of people who have been sacked as a result of them being implicated in cases of sexual harassment?
It will be difficult for me to say, because the issue of sexual harassment isn't got to do with just male lecturer against female student. It's across the spectrum of the categories of workers that operate. It also happens to be even within students and so on and so forth. And so if you were to engage with the committee that is responsible for that, you may have statistics of other categories of workers against students, other categories of workers against lecturers against other categories of workers, and all those dynamics. But for a fact, I know that in the last 4 or 5 years, 2 lecturers have lost their jobs for it.
Okay. How pervasive is this problem? I'm sure you have a rep there, and I'm sure they bring reports to you.
Most definitely. In terms of how pervasive it is, I think that on the side of what we hear in the open, then of course we can say it's very pervasive. But in terms of the number of reported cases, as against our population as university workers and our student population, then of course it looks like it's on the minimal average in terms of numbers. But of course, there are a lot of people who will not report such cases. There are a lot of people who will keep it to themselves and probably be brooding over when, in fact, the laws exist, and for them they have the right to be able to express themselves in respect as to that. And usually, like I said, in the case of lecturers, UTAC would always have an orientation for newly appointed, and these policies that the university has are played out with them. And so if an individual decides to do that, of course, if it is against a student and the student is aware that there is a policy that does not allow for this, and you make a report, responsible, the committee will require evidence, and then the committee, of course, would also invite response from the person that the allegation is made against within 7 days. And the person must respond within 7 days. Assessment is done, the 2 parties are called and interviewed, interacted with in one way or the other, and whatever findings are made, a disciplinary committee is set to take action in relation to that.
Okay. Let me find out, UTAC, what's the official position of UTAC on this subject, this raging debate?
We are of the view that if evidence is established against people who have committed or who have flouted the laws governing how we ought to operate, then of course the law has to take its course. We are not, of course, we are the university, and we work at protecting the regulations governing the way we operate. And so if there was any of our members who contravened the law governing.
All right, unfortunately, we have lost that connection there to Maxwell Agbagba at the University of Ghana campus, but we intend to go back to Maxwell because we would want to hear what the students of the Debate Society have to say about this documentary once they finish watching it. As you can see, the screening is ongoing right now, and we will be getting details from that much later on in the bulletin. We're going to be taking a break for business news. But one of the issues that come up has to do with the fact that most of these students, especially the female students involved in cases of sexual harassment, hardly want to report these cases. In the case of, we have one case of a lady that we spoke with earlier on in the day. Let's listen to her.
Actually, the other time, I was going to a friend of mine outside campus, and the lecturer picked me up and dropped me there. Then onwards, he told me to come and see him in his office and stuffs.
Staffs? What staffs?
Anytime I go there, he asked me if I'm okay. And do I have class, do I have lectures, do I have all the books? If I want to print any stuff, I can come to him and he will do it for me.
This particular story is about my lecturer.
Oh, so you're saying that the excerpt that you've seen, the man in that particular story is your lecturer?
That's my lecturer.
What do you know about him?
I didn't expect this from him. Honestly, I'm very surprised because he seems strict, too strict for that. Jovial sometimes, but then not too strict for that. But the proof that I've seen, I'm surprised. So some are saying that some haven't actually watched the video. They think it's just a student scandal going on because we students do things like this sometimes.
Right, so you heard the previous student who talked about an incident where she believed she was sexually harassed. But the question is, did she ever report that? And that's the question I'd like to put to Maxwell Agbagba back on who's at the University of Ghana campus. Now, Maxwell, we heard one lady who talked about the fact that she believed she was a victim of sexual harassment. The question I'd want you to ask the students that you're standing by with is, why is it that difficult for them to complain or lodge complaints when they believe they've been sexually harassed?
Well, okay, sure, Israel. You are members of the University of Ghana, and I'm sure you are aware of the University of Ghana anti-sexual harassment policy to report when issues like this come up. You want to mention your name next?
So my name is Priscilla, and prior to coming to the University of Ghana, I've heard coming on social media to speak on their issues like culture. I believe that Ghana has a system of protecting the elderly. So if there is any sort of issue against the elderly older person always wins. So it's very difficult, and in an institution like this where they don't want any sort of discredit to their name, it's very difficult to come out to talk about issues like this because they would always like to protect their staff, even at the expense of the student's life.
Okay. Well, we've been following the conversation on social media as well, and the feedback that we're getting is that it seems that it's widespread. I'm sure you have friends in other universities. What do they tell you is the reason they are unable to sometimes come forward to speak out?
I think, like she said, the system is protecting the predators, and the problem is that you can't trust a system where you report to a lecturer who is a friend of the one who is abusing you. So I think more has to be done when it comes to the anti-sexual harassment committee. If it could be a third party or an independent party not affiliated to the university, it would be better because you can't trust the people who are supposed to protect you because they're the ones who are actually abusing the students. So for me, I don't blame people not being able to come out because we live in a system where people are constantly shamed for what they go through. The perpetrators are the ones who ought to feel shame, not the ones who've been abused. And we live in a system where we are constantly shaming victims, and they are not able to come out because anytime they come out, we always have useless questions or questions that don't make sense, that discredits what they actually have to say, what she was wearing, whether or not she was seducing the lecturer, where she was at that time. Those are irrelevant questions because I think that we should stop asking these questions that don't matter because at the end of the day, what we do is we continue to apologize for perpetrators and not really protect victims. So yeah, that's it for me.
Interesting. You have watched the documentary. Jeremiah, I'll come to you shortly. You've watched the documentary. I'm not going to ask for a verdict. I'm going to ask you what you make of this documentary.
So watching it felt insulting and demeaning to me as a young lady, but then it was just a reminder of what so many people are going through in school, at workplaces, and I just felt ashamed to be part of this institution. But at the end of the day, it just reminded me of what I'm going to go through as a woman or as a member of society that protects predators instead of giving room for survivors to speak their issues and speak their truth. We are always discrediting them, as she said, with questions that don't make sense. And this is what I felt like watching the video.
Well, a little bit whispered into my ears that you shouldn't be, embarrassed about this because they're saying that they believe in the University of Ghana Anti-Sexual Harassment Committee to be able to do, a good job on this. But let me find out from you what you also make of the documentary.
Well, I still don't get it, how people can be so shameless, and the fact that people lack knowledge on what consent is and respect for female bodies. Even if I don't really want to go into the documentary, but I think even if there was consent, listening to the language being used, how possessive and inappropriate they are is just shameful. And it's more like we've gone so far, but we are still backwards because people don't realize verbal sexual abuse is still sexual harassment. That's what people don't know. So I think we are still backwards.
I've had opportunity to listen to Professor Ransford Jampo, and one of his line of arguments, is that she's not her student. The lady we are talking about is not her student.
It doesn't matter. We are talking about being appropriate. This is a man who has a reputation of, like, I don't know, he's well known. He's supposed to at least, I really don't know what to say, but I think even if she wasn't his student, he should have at least maintained some level of appropriacy.
Let me find out from Jeremiah Sechi. He's the head of research of the University of Ghana Debate Society. You are the only male, here. What do you make of the documentary? Yeah.
I think the documentary exposes the need to redefine our social definition for sexual misconduct, because I read the sexual misconduct policy of the university, and it stated in there that even though there may be situations where it appears as though the woman has given some form of voluntary consent, that voluntary consent may be deemed invalid because of the power differential between the two people. Because as long as there is the capacity for one party to decide the fate of another party, then that consent means nothing. But I don't think that definition is open to the society, because many people think that, it appears as though she agreed, but it looks as if she was agreeing. Why did she go to the restaurant with him? Why was she leading him on? But all of that happening shows that as a society, we really don't understand how inappropriate these instances still are. And the university has to do more than just posting stickers of zero tolerance for sexual harassment. There needs to be serious discussions and re-evaluation of our social definition. We have UGRCs to teach critical thinking and academic writing, but we still have the pervasive problem of sexual misconduct, and I think that something could be done about that by incorporating some level of education into our curriculum.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeremiah Sechi. I didn't ask your name. What's your name?
Priscilla Usu.
Okay, and then you?
Adepa.
Okay, thanks so much for speaking to us. Well, so you just heard it. The conversation just started here at the physics department of the University of Ghana here on this campus. And as already mentioned, it's one of the meeting days of the Debate Society. And this is going to be what they'll be discussing today. And you are watching the documentary on this projected screen. Right after that, the action will begin here.
All right, thank you very much, Maxwell Agbagba, bringing in that update and that interaction with the students from the University of Ghana. Waiting.